Hi everyone, and welcome back to Learn English with Christy. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the simple past. So if you're ready to learn some English grammar, let's go ahead and begin. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the simple past. In today's video, we are going to talk about when we use the simple past, also how to form the simple past in affirmative sentences, negative sentences, and questions. We will also take a look at some common irregular verbs, and then at the end of today's video, we will have a section where you can test what you learned. So let's go ahead and start by talking about when we use the simple past. We use this verb tense when we are talking about an action in the past that is completed. It is finished. So for example, let's say you washed your car yesterday. Then you could say something like, I washed my car yesterday. Or maybe your friend had pizza for dinner last night. You could say something like, she ate pizza for dinner last night. So both of these examples, these are actions in the past that are complete. So the next thing that we'll talk about are the different kinds of simple past verbs. The simple past has regular verbs and it also has irregular verbs. So let's take a look at some of those examples. So some examples of regular verbs include walk, want, help, play, and study. As you can see, all that we have to do to make it into the simple past is add ed at the end of the base verb. So walk becomes walked, want becomes wanted, help becomes helped, play becomes played, and this last example, study, becomes studied, but you can see there's a small little spelling change. So let me talk about that really quickly now. So study in this case looks a little bit different because you can see an I. So there's a spelling rule with the simple past. If our verb ends in Y and the letter before the Y is a consonant, then we have to drop the Y and add I, and then we add ed. But if we have a verb like play, which also ends in Y, but the letter before the Y is a vowel, like A, E, I, O, or U, then we don't have to drop the Y. All we do is simply add ed like the rest of our verbs. And another spelling rule that I want to mention before I move on is if a verb ends in E, all we have to do is add D. We don't add an additional ed. So one example word would be arrive. That verb already ends in E. So to make it in the simple past, it would just be arrived, A-R-R-I-V-E-D, not E-E-D. Now some examples of irregular verbs include eat, drink, come, cut, and go. As you can see from these, there's no rule. The simple past of these verbs, they are all very different from each other, and that's because they're irregular. Unfortunately, these are some things that you just have to memorize. The more that you use them, the easier it will get for you. Okay, so let's move on in forming the simple past tense. So let's start with the affirmative sentences. And this is just a normal sentence, not a negative, not a question. So how do we form an affirmative simple past tense sentence? We form this by using the subject and the simple past tense verb. So for example, Ahmed visited us last week. Or Maria worked from home yesterday. Or I ran in the competition last year, and Reem swam at the beach this morning. So as you can see from these examples, numbers 1 and 2 are regular verbs. You can see the ed at the end, and numbers 3 and 4 are irregular. There is no specific rule for these. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about how we can form a negative sentence in the simple past. So now we would use the subject plus didn't plus the base form of the verb. So for example, we could say Ahmed didn't visit us last week, or Maria didn't work from home yesterday, or I didn't run in a competition. And our last example, Reem didn't swim at the beach this morning. So notice that the verb in the negative sentences are the base forms of the verb. So this is actually one common mistake that many students make. They still want to use the past tense verb. So they might say, Reem didn't swam at the beach this morning, and that's not correct. Or I didn't ran in the competition. That is not correct. So in the negative, we must use the base form of the verb. And the did in the sentence is what is carrying the past tense through the sentence. So now I'm going to talk about the verb to be. In the simple past, we can use either was or were. When we're using a subject with I, he, she, or it, we use was. When we are using we, they, or you, then we use were. So for example, I was late this morning, or he was happy yesterday. In some examples using were, they were excited to see us, or we were early to the meeting. So now let's talk about the be verb in the negative form. So with this one, it's actually easier than the rest of the other verbs because all we have to do is add not after was or were. We don't have to think about using the base form of the verb. We are just adding not to either was or were, depending on the subject. So if we use that same example, I was late in the morning, we can just add not and say I was not late in the morning, or I wasn't late in the morning. And for an example using were, the example we used in the affirmative sentences was they were excited to see us. If we want to use it in the negative form, we would just add not and say they were not excited to see us. So we're just adding not after were or was. So moving on, let's talk about how we can form questions in the simple past. So we have two kinds of questions. We can ask a yes or no question, and we can also ask a WH question, which is basically using question words like when or where or why or how. So they do have slight differences. So let's take a look first at yes and no questions. We form a yes and no question by starting it with did plus our subject plus our base form of the verb, and then the continuation of the question. So for example, we can ask, did Fatima attend the classes last week? So here we simply have our did plus our subject, which is Fatima, plus our base form, attend. Notice I didn't say did Fatima attended. Okay, we're using the base form of the verb here. And we can answer this by yes, she did, or no, she didn't. And another example, did Rawan visit you last week? And then the answers to that question would be yes, she did, or no, she didn't. And moving on, how to form WH questions. So with this one, all we have to do is add that WH word at the beginning. So it would be WH word plus did plus subject plus the base verb. So for example, where did you run last week. Where is our WH word, did, you is our subject, and run is our base form of the verb. So the answer to this question could be, I ran in Madrid, or I ran wherever, okay? And another example using WH, when did you study last night? So our answer could be something like, I studied at 9 p.m. last night. And now I'm going to talk about that same thing, but now with the be verb. So as we know, the be verb in the simple past, we use was or were. So with a yes/no question, all we have to do is put was or were plus the subject. So for example, we can ask, was Ira in the house? We can answer, yes, he was, or no, he wasn't. And another yes/no question in the past, was Pedro in the class? And you can answer, yes, he was, or no, he wasn't. And for a WH question in the simple past with the be verb, we would start with our WH word plus was or were plus our subject. So for example, if we ask, when was Ira in the house? We can answer, he was in the house yesterday morning. And if we ask, when was he in class? We can respond, he was in class 2 weeks ago. If we ask the question, if he wasn't in class, where was he? We can respond by saying, he was out of town. Okay, so now let's go ahead and test what you learned. I'm going to give you some sample sentences, and I'm also going to give you the base form of a verb. And I want you to put in the correct word or words that belong in the blank. Now these could be regular verbs, these could be irregular verbs, they could be affirmative, they could be negative, or they could be questions. So it's a lot that we looked at in today's video, but just try your best with this little quiz. Number 1, I blank to the movies with Omar. And the base form of the verb is go. So what belongs here for the simple past? If you put went, you are correct here. This is an irregular verb and it's an affirmative sentence. So we need to put went. I went to the movies with Omar. Number 2, they blank to school. The base form of this verb is walk, and I want you to use it in the negative form. So if you put didn't walk, you are correct. It is negative, so we need to keep the base form of the verb walk. So they didn't walk to school is our correct answer. Number 3, my dog blank hungry. Here I want you to use negative again, but I want you to use the be verb. So what belongs in the blank here? If you put my dog was not hungry, you are correct. It is a be verb, so we know we have to use was or were. It's a dog, so that's he or she, so we need was. For number 4, it's a question. So you're going to put 2 words in 2 different blanks. So our sentence is blank, she blank, good coffee. So our verb here is make, and again, we're using it in a question. So which words belong in the blanks here? So if you put did and the base form make, you are correct. So the sentence should read, did she make good coffee? Number 5 is also a question. So I want you to fill in the blank. When blank, you in Mexico. So which word belongs here in the blank? If you put were, you are correct. It's a simple past question using the be verb. And the question is about you, so we need to use were. So again, when were you in Mexico is the correct answer here. Let's go ahead and do one more. We blank nervous taking the quiz. I want you to use the verb be. So which word belongs in the blank? If you said were, you are correct. The past tense of be is were when we're talking about the subject we. So again, we were nervous taking the quiz. So how did you do with the quiz? Did you struggle with any of those? Maybe the questions or the negatives, or maybe the affirmatives, maybe some of the irregulars. Let me know in the comments below how many you got out of 6. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. That's all I have for today's video. Have a good day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.